It's me. It's me. I'm back. And I am ready to talk to you guys for the next 10 minutes or so. Alex is having me doing the voice today because we're talking about the actual movement, looking, and system mechanics for the initial part of the game. Now, because I'm doing the voiceover, Alex told me I didn't need to wear overalls, but I'm doing it anyways because I want to and because it's great. So, as I've discussed before, I'm Gabe. I'm the engineer of this. I'm the one that makes sure stuff works, and as you can see, I am programming in this video currently. What I'm actually programming and what I'm actually setting is the system mechanics for movement in the game. There's a lot to it, but it's actually pretty simple once you get the hang of it down. One of the first things you have to handle is just setting up the player character, which you saw earlier on. And what I'm doing now is setting up the mouse look, which is going to be a script that is attached to the player's camera itself that allows for the player to look around in the environment itself. Actually, look over right, look over left, and as you can see here, I can start to do it. Now, of course, that comes with a bunch of bugs. One of the first things I needed to do was put the camera actually in first-person mode, which I forgot to do initially, but as you can see, it's coming together, and I'm just adding a couple other features that help out. Look at that. What a beautiful environment. It's all just flat. This is for the flatters out there. Earth's not flat. Don't tell me it's flat. Now, the next thing I started setting up was the actual character movement. So the previous script, as I said, was the mouse look. It's actually just looking around the environment. This next one is the actual moving around the environment. So we have it mapped to the WASD controls. So if you hit W or S, you go forward or backwards, and D and A are right and left relatively. So of course, one of the first things you got to do is actually get that axis and bind it to a value, which is always a fun process. But from there, I just pretty much set up a vector 3 movement variable. That's what they're called, variables. And then I just, through the player controller, set the movement to that vector 3. So whenever there's an update movement from pressing down any of the WASD buttons, it'll allow me to subsequently move around. And of course, the character controller needs to be added to the added to the actual game object, and then updating the different things. And look at that, you can move around now. And now I'm just kind of fixing a few bugs, a few little mishaps throughout the thing, a few little weird things. Also, in case you didn't realize, this is all sped up. I cannot type that fast or move that fast in-game. It would be really cool if I could, but I subsequently cannot. And now what I'm setting up is actually the jump function. So every good game out there allows your character to jump, whether it's in first person or third person. We're of course in first person right now, but through that, you need to also set up a jump function. It's actually an interesting way that you can set it up by implementing something called a ground mask, which allows you to detect when you're on something that is actually jumpable. So, for instance, the terrain you can jump off of, but if you don't want to jump while in water, then that wouldn't be jumpable basically. And you can create that mask for pretty much any object that's in game and set that to be the actual object tag or mask. And through that, excuse me, you can actually now check whether or not you can jump or not. And then if you can actually set the square root to what you want the jump to be. So that's how I ended up doing it, was just setting it up so that when an empty game object is touching the ground, you're able to jump, and then I set it up so that you follow basically this parabolic arc of where you jumped in. It might sound technical, but it's fun to me. Some people don't find it fun, Alex, but I find it a lot of fun. And look at that. I can jump. It might not look like anything, but I can't actually jump. I'll show you what it actually looks like. Look at that. I can jump now. Now I'm jumping in my camera. Woohoo! And what I just did there was make a prefab of it so that that character and all the subsequent scripts and controls it has can be transferred over to whatever level I want. And now I'm actually going to be setting up the spaceship. And I just created a script called the spaceship script where I'm going to be, or the spaceship controller, where I'm going to actually be controlling the movement for the spaceship. And of course, one of the first things I create is the spaceship model, making sure that the model can follow and soaking the camera can follow where the spaceship game object is actually going. Now, for flying, there's a few different controls that I wanted to have. The first being the spaceship pretty much following where the mouse is, which was done in a pretty interesting way. Instead of, for instance, with the other player character, the first-person player character, where you can look wherever, that doesn't mean you're going, the spaceship is actually going to be constantly in motion. So wherever the mouse is pointed to, that is where the spaceship is going to follow, basically. So if the mouse is in the center screen, it's always going to go forward without turning at all. But if it's in the upper right corner, it's going to move towards the upper right corner. And the other controls that I mapped for the spaceship was W of the WASD. So W actually makes you go faster, and A and D, those controls are mapped to roll the ship. So you can actually like literally roll and barrel roll while flying around, which is actually pretty cool thing to do while flying, if I do say so myself. And as you can see here, this is actually, most of the axes I've already mapped, but I needed to map one for roll, and I make a really dumb mistake early on, and I call it raw instead of roll for some reason, because I'm a dummy. Well, I actually do that in the code, but I set up roll to take in the keys for A and D, and have specific like other variables in it that will subsequently affect how the spaceship rolls. And here I am just binding it to a variable so that I can actually like use it. I'm just moving the character controller to be the center of the spaceship and other areas, just so that it can actually function properly and turn properly. And this is where I start having the different mess ups. This is where I start to figure out that I messed up, and figuring out where I messed up. I'm trying to search it in this area because that's where the thing is saying. And there I go. I figured it out. My dummy butt figured it out. And here I am flying. So this is what the flying mechanics, as you can see, you can twist around. It might seem a little... at first, the mouse sensitivity was a little bit too high, but as you can see here, it's a little bit better. And it looks a little janky because the terrain's there, but ultimately it's actually good. And that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching, and As always, like, subscribe, and check us out on Patreon, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks!